Now, your average smartphone is an amazing gadget, and you might say they've changed our lives for the better in so many ways. But there are some taxi drivers down there in the city who would disagree.
We've got nearly 2,000 cabs in the city as it is. What more do you want? We don't need any more cabs, do we?
The taxi drivers in this city, including many in the rank over there, are not happy. They're not happy about Uber.
Uber is a private hire company which originated in San Francisco's Silicon Valley. You can order a car at the touch of a button, and using their app, you can see where their cars are and they can see where you are. After the journey, the fare is deducted from your bank account.
The taxi companies say Uber offers nothing more than unfair competition, but supporters say the company offers an updated alternative to the traditional taxi cab.
When Uber first arrived in London, the cabbies blocked the streets in protest. Now Uber's expanding into the southeast. First Brighton, but it's likely they'll come to other towns in our region soon.
So are taxi drivers here in Brighton right to protest against the expansion of Uber? Or does the company represent the future of travel in the city? So, with this phone, I'm going to order a cab from Streamline, one of the main taxi providers in the city, which is celebrating 80 years operating in Brighton and Hove. With this phone, I'm going to order a cab from Uber, a company which is celebrating 8 years since it was set up in America. Hello, could I have a taxi, please, from Brighton Pier to Brighton Station, and I'd like to go via the Royal Sussex County Hospital.
The traditional taxi firm sent me a driver called Steve.
So, Steve, how long have you been a taxi driver in the city?
I've been a taxi driver in this city for 30 years. I enjoy it, you don't get 2 days the same. The changes I've seen, obviously, we've become a city. Apart from that, recently, we've been inundated with Uber cabs.
Uber were unable to source a driver to talk to us. However, when we booked an Uber using the app, the driver, who lives in Crawley, was happy to speak on condition that we didn't reveal his identity.
What's it like being an Uber driver in Brighton and Hove? Because a lot of taxis here are very unhappy.
Yes, I have absolutely no idea why they are unhappy, as long as everything is legal.
Uber were granted a 1-year licence to operate in Brighton and Hove at a council meeting held in October 2015. However, they only started operating at the end of last year, after the licence was renewed. It was originally granted on condition they only use Brighton licensed drivers, as opposed to drivers licensed by other authorities, such as Transport for London. Councillor Jackie O'Quinn is chair of the committee that renewed Uber's licence.
Our biggest concerns are safety. Brighton and Hove licensed taxi drivers have a very high standard. They have paid for courses they have done. Transport for London don't have that. They don't have the CCTV, and they also don't have the local knowledge test.
Uber are spreading across the UK. The launch in Brighton and Hove has been overseen by their expansion manager, Fred Jones.
We've been launched about 4 months, and we've seen a fantastic demand for our service.
Tell us about your relationship with Brighton and Hove City Council. Is it a good one?
Absolutely. So we're compliant with our Brighton and Hove licence and the conditions imposed on us.
Yeah, they've got some Brighton and Hove drivers, but not very many. The city has been flooded with Transport for London taxi drivers. That is what is causing the problems.
Brighton and Hove City Council wanted all Uber drivers to be licensed by them, but it's now emerged that Uber drivers licensed in other parts of the country, like London, can operate perfectly legally in Brighton as long as they use the app and are not flagged down in the street. This means Uber doesn't need the council's permission to operate in the city.
If we revoke their licence, what would happen is we would still have all these taxis coming in, because the legislation allows it, the legislation from 1976 and the legislation from 2015. It allows them to do that. We need government legislation. We need joint enforcement of the taxis, because I think we thought at least if we had this agreement that we would have some way of being able to work with Uber or talk to them and so on. If we have no agreement, we can't do anything. So we are in an impossible situation.
John Streeter is the boss of Streamline Taxis. He has serious concerns that drivers without the Brighton and Hove licence, like TfL licensed drivers, will bring down the safety standards. Brighton's Blue Book contains regulations that TfL don't deem necessary.
I'm very passionate about the licensed trade in Brighton and Hove, and all the time we want to raise standards. And since Uber have come in using TfL licensed vehicles, the standards have dropped.
As an example, John points out that the rules in the Blue Book say that every Brighton and Hove taxi must have CCTV. Transport for London confirms their licensed cars do not have to have CCTV, but they deny that makes them any less safe than Brighton and Hove taxis.
You can't stop progress. So if they was going to come here, yeah, open and make them welcome with open arms. But as they don't adhere to the rules, they're not welcome.
They say, you come from London and they have different rules in London for taxis to Brighton and Hove, so they say it's not fair.
Yes, but this is made by his country, not by us.
Well, changes were made as early as 2015 to facilitate people having more freedom to drop off and pick up across the UK, and that's really to bring competition and choice to the market. And consumers can benefit with a more reliable service and better value transport as well. Obviously that's difficult for some people. Some people perhaps haven't responded positively, and there have been a few troubles with some local individuals and damage, threats and intimidation of our drivers.
Have you had any encounters with taxi drivers? Have you had any...
Moment,
No.
They was absolutely okay. They were actually more than okay. They was gentle.
I've heard of no instances whatsoever. And if any of our drivers were caught doing something like that, it's something Streamline will not stand by.
I think some of the old companies who've been here for nearly 100 years, and they're really worried about their future.
I'm very sorry, but they'll have to be hushed now. They have to be worried because they are not offered what the client would want in the days of today.
What would you say to the traditional taxi companies in Brighton and Hove who are really worried about the future of their business because of Uber?
Well, the Uber platform is open to all licensed drivers.
So you're saying join Uber or bust?
Not at all. Like I say, I think taxi and private hire are part of the transport ecosystem, and there's a really valuable role for each to play for the cities in the UK.
Uber has certainly come as a shock to the taxi firms who've been operating in Brighton for decades. Perhaps it'll turn out that the two can coexist quite happily. But if this is a battle, then it'll be the passengers who decide the winner.